8, Dr. Calder.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Climate Change Issues. How does the government's moderated ETS balance New Zealand's environmental and economic interests?
The Honourable Dr. Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, the moderated scheme ensures New Zealand does its fair share on climate change without imposing excessive costs on businesses, farmers and households. The power and fuel price increases have been halved by the amendments National passed last year, and we have ensured that trade-exposed sectors with significant emissions are not put at risk by providing allocations that offset the cost of the scheme.
Supplementary question.
Dr. Calder.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What is the threshold for trade-exposed sectors to get an allocation to offset their ETS costs, and how were these changed by the government?
The Honourable Dr. Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, the original scheme in 2008 provided support for industry if their emissions exceeded 50,000 tonnes, but this disadvantaged small exporters whose emissions were high as a proportion of their costs. National's changes mean that if any trade-exposed business has costs from the ETS that exceed 1%, they will be eligible for 60% support, and if it exceeds 2% of their costs, they'll be eligible for 90% support. These changes have not increased the total amount of industry allocations because some large emitters face less than the 1% cost impact from the ETS and are now ineligible for support. Our approach is fairer and will ensure the ETS does not impact significantly on the competitiveness of New Zealand trade-exposed businesses.
That's right.
Dr. Calder.
The Minister. Is the claim correct that New Zealand is imposing costs on its businesses and consumers that are not being faced by any of our trading partners?
Honourable Dr. Nick Smith.
No, that claim is not correct. Of our 10 top trading partners, 5 have legally binding Kyoto commitments to reduce emissions: the UK, France, Germany, Australia and Japan. The 3 of these in Europe have had emissions trading schemes for 5 years ahead of us and are imposing costs on energy more than double of our moderated scheme. A further 3 countries already have ETS schemes in place at state level: New South Wales in Australia, the 7 northeastern states in the US, and the Japanese scheme, which covers 455 businesses. There are also other policies like the mandatory renewable energy targets in Australia that will increase power prices by 7%.
Charles Chauvel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is the Minister aware that New Zealand's climate change representative said 3 weeks ago in Bonn that his government has no way of knowing what the effect of his emissions trading scheme will be on domestic emissions reductions? And isn't his latest claim that there will be a reduction in New Zealand's emissions by 19 million tonnes by 2012 just another case of him making up the numbers to suit his argument?
Well, Mr. Speaker,
Dr. Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, the officials that provided the advice of 19 million tonnes is exactly the evidence that was provided to the Select Committee last year, of which the member had an opportunity to question. It is difficult to predict exactly how the market will behave to the improved incentives for planting trees, the improvements for investing in renewable energy, but I have to say, after the appalling record of deforestation and a trebling in the amount of electricity burned from coal, almost a record increase in emissions, I won't be looking to Labour's example on how to solve this problem.
Charles Chauvel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Why should householders bear a disproportionate burden of the costs of his ETS, as the Prime Minister admitted after Cabinet on Monday that they would, given that those costs will simply subsidise his government's plans to encourage more mining, the conversion of dirty lignite into fertiliser and diesel, more dairying and more roads, all of which will inevitably lead to a major rise in New Zealand's domestic greenhouse gas emissions?
Well, Mr. Speaker,
Dr. Nick Smith.
The first issue is important is that the balance of the ETS costs as they fall on business vis-a-vis households has not changed with National's amendments and are identical to those under the Labour scheme for the Kyoto period. That is absolutely correct. The changes that we have made with respect to... the member who interjects didn't listen to what I said. In the first Kyoto period, under which neither Labour or National scheme would have included agriculture. The second point I find extraordinary for Labour members is to complain about the impacts on power and petrol prices when they have advocated a scheme that would put prices up a whole lot more.
Point of order. Point of order.
Point of order, Craig Foss.
Excuse me, Mr Speaker. A member opposite called another member in here dishonest during the questioning of the previous member, and I don't. That will bring disorder to the House, Mr Speaker. I'm not sure if you heard the comment. One of the members to your left, obviously.
Forgive me, I didn't hear it. If a member did call someone dishonest, I'd ask them to, with point of order.
Mr Speaker, what I said, and I'm not trying to repeat this, I'm just trying to gauge whether it is an error, and if it's an error I'll certainly withdraw. I said that the selective use of dates was intellectually dishonest.
Okay. No, okay, I hear the honourable member. I think we just go too far if we rule out intellectual dishonesty, because I think it's a widely used term, and if members take offence... Order. No. Order. I just ask members to be reasonable, but if members want to avoid being accused of that, then they should just think a little more clearly about what they're saying. John Boscawen, supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Supplementary to the Minister. Does the Minister agree with R&D Industries founder and Executive Director Ron Greer that his business, employing 13 staff, would not survive the ETS if it stayed in New Zealand, and is therefore moving to Singapore? And isn't R&D Industries just one example proving Act's point that the ETS is costing New Zealand jobs for no environmental gain?
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
The first point with respect to the environmental gain is that the projections are that the ETS will reduce New Zealand's emissions by 19 million tonnes. I don't think anybody would say that that was no environmental gain. The second point is that any business that has a significant portion of their emissions, i.e. the cost to them, are more than 1%, are eligible for support under the changes that National made to ensure that their competitiveness is not adversely affected, and I'd be interested to see the figures from that specific business.
John Boscawen.
Mr Speaker, what does the Minister say to the 13 employees of R&D Industries who won't be receiving this year's tax cuts because they've lost their jobs due to National's ETS?
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Well, Mr Speaker, I've seen no evidence that would suggest that the specifics of that business would impact on costs to the point where it would compromise its competitiveness. If the member would like to provide me with the data, I'd be happy to provide it. If the ETS has a significant impact, that business might well be eligible for an allocation of which their competitiveness would not be affected.
Question number 9. Is it point of order? I ask the member please to use a big voice. I can't hear a thing he's saying.
I'm sorry, sir. I think it's the microphone. It wasn't on, so...
Well, no, order. The member should just... He's now further down the back of the chamber.
Yes,
He'll need to learn to use a bigger voice.
Further from God, sir. That's certainly true.
All I can say, it's better than I've heard another speaker referred to in recent weeks. Charles Chauvel.
Thank you, sir. I seek leave. I seek leave to table a 2009 Ministry of Economic Development report showing that the vast majority of new electricity project consents approved in New Zealand by the end of 2008 were from renewable resources.
Leave is sought to table that document. Is there any objection? There is objection. Question number 9, the Honourable Nanaia Mahuta.